Good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining our first Sage Intacct webinar of the year, latest updates in the Sage Intacct 2020 Release 1. I'm Tracy Thompson, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use the webinar console. The orange arrow on the right will let you toggle the tray open or closed. At the bottom of the control tray, you will see a chat window. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time through the webinar for our presenters via the chat function. We will have a Q&A later, but if you don't get them today, we'll be sure to respond to your questions after the webinar. For the audio settings, go to Webinar Console. You should see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through the telephone, please choose Use Telephone option. And if you're using computer speakers, please select the mic and speakers options. Additionally, I would like to note this webinar is going to be recorded. We will also send out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording of the webinar within 48 hours. Please keep an eye out for this email, and if you are interested in viewing the webinar after today or sharing it with any of your colleagues who couldn't make it. We are also offering CPE with today's presentation. To qualify for CPE, you must use a personal computer, no smartphones, and log in with your own information and unique URL. Be logged in to our online software for at least 50 consecutive minutes within the scheduled timeframe of the webinar. Actively respond to at least 75% of the polling questions, and complete the evaluation survey at the end of the webinar. For today's webinar, our experts will be Irene Bushnell and David Gunn, a senior manager and consultant at Armanino. Our learning objectives for this webinar today are: describe exciting new updates to the bank reconciliations feature. Give more insight to your MEA allocations within the custom report writer for contracts. Be able to review new enhanced purchasing workflow that allows for more focused reporting. Identify how user experience continues to be enhanced with features designed and added to make the navigation of the UI simple and efficient. And with that, we'll start off with our first section with David.
Great, thanks Tracy. Really excited to be with everyone today, and let's go ahead and jump right into General Ledger. Next slide, perfect. And just real quick, wanted to touch on the note that you're gonna see right here on the right side of your screen right now. It says, this idea came from users who posted in the community. So you're gonna see this note throughout our presentation on both Irene and I's slides, just to let everyone know that where these certain ideas are coming from, specifically when it's from the community. We thought this would be a really good thing to make note of to show the power of the community and getting all these enhancement ideas onto Intacct product roadmap. And so if time permits, at the end of this call, Irene's going to be sharing some other ideas from the community. But right now, let's jump into General Ledger. And the first thing we're going to look at is the add and access journal entry attachments quickly. So when you view transactions for a journal, if a transaction has one or more attachments, you're now going to see an icon that looks like a paperclip that's going to be at the end of the row to show at a glance which transactions have attachments. You're still going to be able to add attachments to single journal entries the same way as you would have before by going into that actual entry and then selecting the attachment and attaching it there. But you can now also add the same attachment to multiple journal entries. So that screenshot on the right side of your screen is showing the function here. You'll check off all the entries that need to be selected. You'll hit the attach button. That'll then prompt you to your file browser and then go ahead and select the file that should be attached. So some cool new functionality for attachments here. Next slide. Next, we have expanded dynamic allocation periods. So there's going to be new enhancements to source pool and basis sections of your dynamic allocations definition if you are using them in your system. These enhancements are going to provide more standard and custom periods to you that are going to really give you a lot more precision when using your dynamic allocations. And finally, your dynamic time periods will leverage the as of date when you generate an allocation, and they're also going to use the as of date to determine appropriate periods. So again, a couple new features here if you are using dynamic allocations in your system. And next slide. And finally, in general ledger, we have general ledger labeling enhancements. So there have been a few changes made to the labels within this module for them to be more intuitive and consistent. So you're going to see that when you're going in to edit um, a GL account or statistical account, you're going to see that the dimensions field have now been renamed. So on the GL accounts page, include dimensions is now going to be require dimensions. Same thing on the stat accounts page. Dimensions, as it was called, is now going to be require dimensions. So again, just to make it more consistent between both of the screens. And then finally, on the GL setup page, start as of is now the first full dual reporting period. So just some things to look out here if you might have seen any of the labels change. Next slide.
All right, looks like we're starting with our first polling question. Everyone see the polling question? Are you currently using, oh, there she goes.
Oh, sorry. Here I am. Are you currently using an attachment feature in Sage Intacct? Yes, no, and if not, can you comment in the question pane or not sure? All right. Let's go ahead and see the results. Awesome. So we got 78% yes, 14% no, and 8% not sure.
Well, that's very interesting. Hello, everyone. This is Irene. Thanks again for joining our call today. So attachments, so 78%, that's exciting. Attachments are very useful in Sage Intacct, so glad to see a lot of you are using those. No, so about 14% no. Maybe you have a good reason for that. I don't see anything in the question panel yet, but if you want to comment as to why you're not, we're kind of curious reasons that organizations don't. And then 8% not sure. So a few of you out there aren't sure if you're using attachments, so that might be something that you want to check with other team members. If you're not using them, find out why, and maybe there would be a good business case for you to actually start using attachments in Sage Intacct. Thank
Great.
you.
And
Good
also,
information.
yeah, and just as a reminder, make sure you answer 75% of those questions, and we'll get you your CP for that. So great, Irene, you're up.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, let's talk about the budgets and plans module. That is a module in Intacct. Remember, it's not the standard budgeting functionality in Sage Intacct. This is an add-on module that a lot of companies are using. It's a wonderful module to help with more detailed budgeting, get you out of Excel, provides workflows, etc. So they're really enhancing this with every release. We're seeing some really nice new features. This release 1, you can now populate your entire budget over in your budget and plan module with either actuals and or budget data from Sage Intacct. So makes for a lot of really good flexibility so that you can determine for next year where you want that data to come from. You can also populate just budget lines, budget groups, or your individual root budget line. So lots of flexibility there for creating really detailed budgets over in the budget and plan module. Another new feature, and again, here's that little note. This idea came from users who posted the idea in the community. We saw, you guys, a whole lot of these in this release, which is really exciting and really shows that Intacct does, in fact, listen to those that are taking the time to get in the community and put in ideas and vote. So very important. Budgeting and planning highlight, update your dimensions mapping table, all right, when you're importing dimensions from Excel. So you can see there's 2 different options if you're going to be importing into that module, whether you want to import multiple dimension values from Excel. And if you do, then it says, okay, well, which dimension? So you can pick and choose which dimensions you want to import. And you also have the ability to create a dimension value. So maybe there's something that you're tracking in Excel right now that you want to also put in the budget and plan module. It's not a dimension in Intacct, but it's something that you want over there. You have that ability to be able to go in and update that as you're doing your importing into the budget and plan module. All right, on to company administration.
All
David?
right, great. Next slide, please. Awesome. So the first change here made in company administration you're going to see is the operating country field. So you're now going to be able to specify the operating country for your company and your entities. You're going to be able to find this if you go to company, then hit company again. It'll take you to this screen, general information. You'll see the operating country field right there. So this field was added to the company information page and the entity information page, so that you can select your country in which your company or your entity operates. This is mainly added for reporting purposes, and it's going to default to the United States for both new and existing customers. So if you are not in the United States, might be a change that you want to go in and make sure that it's set to correctly wherever you are. Next slide.
And just a thought on this screen while you're talking about it there, David, you don't need to go back, Brian, but on that, as David alluded to, there's not much functionality around that right now, but I guarantee you Intacct is working very, very hard on making their software more feature enriched with a lot of things for multi-currency, multi-country type environments. So I'm sure that's just the first step on what will be functionality along the way. So make sure it's set right, even if you don't have multi-company yet. Thank you.
Definitely. Thanks for pointing that out, Irene. And then finally, in company administration is the system user. So this is a new user you might have seen on the external users page. It exists in all companies. And so basically, this user was added in this release as a way for Intacct to provide additional details in a lot of the offline processes that are not going to be user initiated on your side. And so basically, this user was really added to help Intacct gear up to introduce a lot more automation to offline processes such as bank feeds in Intacct. I think we're going to see the system user, again, like it just said here, going forward being used to help with a lot more enhancements that are going to be rolled out into future releases. So something to look forward to here. Next slide. Great, and then we'll jump in right into cash management. So first in cash management is the bank reconciliation and bank feed enhancements. I'm sure a lot of people saw this, kind of wondering about the changes that were made here. So first, let's just jump into the bank reconciliation. You're now going to be able to reopen a reconciliation. This is going to be based on your permissions and roles that are attached to your user that can specifically be found under the cash management module. And just some best practices we wanted to note here are that you're going to want to gather any import files that were used to originally reconcile, and also download the associated reconciliation reports that are going to be on the histories page, so that you have a really clear record going into what was matched and what was cleared, so that you don't undo anything that shouldn't be undone. You're really making sure to go ahead and do what is only needed when going ahead and reopening a reconciliation. Next is the ability to create journal entries. So you're going to be able to create journal entries from an individual line item in a reconciliation. And the fields on this JE page are going to default from the original transaction to help you save time. And then finally is the matching improvement. So there was an auto match. The auto match function now excludes transactions that you might have already manually unmatched. So you don't have to go back again and uncheck them and unmatch them. So again, all of these features kind of just added to help you limit your errors, limit the time that it takes for you to do your reconciliations.
Yeah, and David, some good features. And just a call out here, a lot of you are using Armanino's top level versus entity level transaction information. And so with that middle bullet, David, right, on create journal entries, if you have installed the top level entity level limitations and you're only allowing transactions at the entity level, then that feature wouldn't be available. Because if you're reconciling at the top level and you click to go in and do an entry, it's going to try to add it at the top level.
Yeah, totally. And a really great thing to point out. Thanks for that.
Yeah, because I recognize a lot of names of attendees in here that I know are using that top level entity level package. And so just a call out there that if you try to do it, an entry during your bank rec and you get that error message that says you're at the top level versus entity level, just a reminder that is why. It's because of that top level entity level package where you're controlling your entries. Thank you.
Gotcha. Yeah, very good call out. And then next, let's just touch on some enhancements to, oh, sorry, can you go back there? Sorry, some enhancements to bank feeds. So we have filter bank feeds based on your statement ending date. So you're now going to see that your bank feed transactions, if you are using this, are now only going to download through the statement ending date to help prevent your recon errors. You're going to have cross-period matching, which will allow you to match transactions that are going to span 2 different recon periods for a lot smoother of a process. And then finally is just multi-entity electronic customer payments. So previously, if you had a bank that was created at your top level and your invoices were created at the entity level, you weren't able to go ahead and receive a payment in that entity. But now with this new feature, you can receive a payment for an entity that's associated with a bank at a top level. So cool new feature there with cash management, bank recs, and bank feeds. Next slide. And then finally, in cash management, most people might have noticed this when the release hit, but they're going to be retiring the previous bank reconciliation screen. So the old screen is set to be retired in release 2, which is going to be in May. But it can still be accessed now via the old user interface by, if you are in the new user interface, hitting your name at the top, switching to the previous UI, going to cash management and going to the bank reconciliation there. We really do want to recommend that going forward, everyone begins to work in both the new user interface as well as this new bank rec screen. So you have plenty of time to go ahead and familiarize yourself with the new feature before the old one is completely gone. So just something to note there. And a few other things to note about the new bank rec screen is that it's really designed to handle large volumes of transactions and altogether make your month-end process a lot more smooth and easy. It's got intuitive filtering, sorting, and pagination. And using bank feeds in conjunction with this is going to help you save even more time on your reconciliation process. So we really encourage everyone to try to go ahead and use both of these new features. And next slide.
Okay, before we get to the polling question, we did have one question came in, which is a good one. Some users are experiencing a lag. So they've implemented the new bank feed module, but there is a 2-day lag on the automatic feed. This particular organization uses Wells Fargo as an example. And so wondering if others are seeing a lag out there. We've implemented quite a few of these and I have not seen a lag yet. I'm wondering if it's a setting in Wells Fargo banking, or I don't know why there would be a 2-day lag. So I've not seen that before. If you want to reach out after this and give me a little bit more information, give us some more information, maybe we can take it offline and see if there's something else, but I'll respond to that in the question. But I don't think for the most part there should be a 2-day lag. It should be pretty instantaneous. David, I know you handle the support desk. Would you agree, or have you seen lag in the automatic feed?
I haven't seen anyone come through with a lag per se yet, so no, kind of in the same boat as you.
Okay, thank you. All right, Tracy, let's do the polling question.
Yep, polling question number 2. Are you utilizing the new Action UI? Please select one. Yes, fully utilizing, mostly utilizing, occasionally, and no, not at all. And just as a reminder for people who may have jumped on a little late, we will be sending out a recording of today's webinar with the slides, so you can forward to any colleagues that may have not been able to join today. And also, again, a reminder for the CPE, if you are here, to answer 75% of the questions, the survey at the end, and stay on for 50 minutes. All right, we'll just give a few more seconds here.
Okay, we're going to do the countdown.
All right.
Everybody vote.
All right, cool. So we got 58%.
Oh,
Kind of all over the board.
Nice.
Yeah, look at this. Okay, so yes, fully utilizing 58%. Whoops, we lost our polling. I'm not sure what happened there.
There it goes.
There it is. Okay. So, well, 58%, that's not bad. Mostly utilizing. We find ourselves doing that as well. Once in a while, we flip back to the old UI for the platform services or something because it's kind of displaying a little bit, but occasionally switching back and forth. I think that's probably how we are, David, our team.
Mm-hmm.
No, not at all. All right, you 17%. No, not at all. You better hurry up and get busy and get that switch because you're gonna have it forced on you here very soon. If you need, you guys, if you need any help with that, it's not a hard UI. It's just something that's, new to get used to. Please
Mm-hmm.
reach out. Please reach out to your client manager or here at Armanino. Happy to schedule like a 1-hour training session to get your team comfortable with it or whatever you might need. But it is coming. So the clock is ticking. Good information. Thank you.
Awesome, great. And Irene, I think you're up next.
All right, so projects module, for those of you that are using projects, only one enhancement here, but it's a really good one. Again, an idea from the community. And that is if you are generating invoices through the project module. So you might be entering bills, you might be entering time and expenses, and then you're pulling all of those costs into an invoice for your customer. In the past, it did not include or give you the option to include reversed transactions. So now there's an actual checkbox, as you can see. This is the filters tab when you go into generate invoices, and you can include reverse transactions if you want to. Great scenario might be a accounts payable bill. Maybe there was going to be something that you purchased on behalf of your customer. You were going to pass on those costs on their invoice, right? And then for whatever reason, there was an adjustment that needed to be made, or the information got sent back or something. You can go in and reverse the bill, right, in AP, because you're not going to be paying that bill. It's not been paid. And then that will show, if you want it to, on the customer invoice. So it shows where the bill came in, and then you can show the reversal. So, not necessarily a feature that a lot of people might use, but at least it's there now. Same with expense reports. That's probably more likely. An employee expense transaction that you want to show has been reversed, and then show that on their invoice. So good feature for those of you that are using projects. All right, next up is contracts. A lot more companies starting to use contracts out there with the whole ASC 606 rules and regulations changing. Intacct's making a lot of progress here. Again, there's that note, idea from the community. MEA allocations detail reporting object. What that means is in the custom report wizard, where you select your primary data source to create a custom report, they've added a new object called contract MEA allocation details. That allows you to get into the details of the allocation so that you can create your own custom reports on what that MEA allocation is doing. You do have to be subscribed to the contract advanced revenue management. That's what gives you the MEA allocation. So just a note there that you have to be subscribed to that. And here's just an example of a report that you could create. So this is from the custom report writer using that object. And as you can see, you can really now start seeing the details of that MEA allocation, what the value was, what the fair value prices you have entered, what your MEA percent is, your carve in, carve out amount, okay, and then the actual MEA amount. So a really good feature for those of you that are using contracts. Another one that's an important one, and this one, if you have contracts, please, you'll want to go in and do this. They've added a new permission. So now under contracts permissions, there is a manage schedules option so that you can determine who in your organization should actually be able to run those revenue and expense postings. So you'll want to go to your contract permissions, and you'll want to make sure that that is selected correctly. For those that are on contracts, what Intacct is doing is, if you are user-based permissions, they assigned the manage schedules permission to all business users that have the contract list view, add, edit, or delete permission. And then if you're in a role-based permission, they assign the manage schedules run permission to all roles that just have the contract add permission. So that's the default in there, that's in there for those of you that already have contracts installed. So go ahead and go check that, make sure that the right people have that run permission. All right, and look, we're already to polling question number 3.
Nice. All right, cool. So, polling question number 3. Do you feel the roles and permissions are efficient for your organization? Yes, they work great. Mostly could be better. Or no, they need to be revisited. All right, just one more minute here. Make sure everyone get their answer in. All right, let's see the results. Oh, a tie.
Yeah, look at that. Very nice. Okay, so yes, they work great. Good. So everybody's doing what they need to be doing. You've got your internal control set nicely. Awesome. Mostly, but they could be better. So maybe some of you are thinking that there's not enough permissions, that Intacct could do a little bit more in there, and or that maybe you need to revisit some of your permissions, which is the last one. No, they need to be revisited. So, that's something that's one of those things that you just have to find time for, right? We're all so busy and we think, man, we got to go fix permissions, and that's what you do. You think about it and on you go with your busy, busy day. Obviously, there's, Armanino can help with that. Other people in your organization might be able to help, but permissions are really important. And as we just saw on the previous slide, Intacct does add new permissions sometimes, and so it's important to keep up on those. So I bet if you dedicated about 30 minutes, maybe with a team of a couple people, you could kind of walk through how the roles are set up and the permissions in each one and make sure everything is set right. So good to know. Something to think about for each organization. Thank you.
Great. And Irene, I'll pass it to you for inventory.
All right, inventory. So enhancements in inventory, you can now choose both serial and lot tracking on items. So if you're using the inventory module, you can see there on the advanced tab of the item button, we now have the ability down there to choose both. In the past, you had to choose one or the other, but now you can actually choose both as needed. Why might you want to do that? So for example, maybe you buy laptops from suppliers through a wholesale distributor or something like that, anything through a distributor. And when you receive the units, you enter a serial number and assign the same lot number to each unit. And then if a customer returns a defective laptop, for example, you can then use that lot number to identify the disposition of all of the laptops received from that distributor in the lot. So it makes for some great tracking, that sort of information if you're using the inventory module. The other enhancement is the ability to draft stockable kits. And I know there's someone on this audience laughing right now because we just learned not too long ago there is an issue with this, so beware. But you are going to have the ability, as you can see, that you can draft kits, giving you the ability to kind of work on it until you get it where you need it to be, and then go ahead and post it. That is a bug right now. It's not working as it was supposed to when they released it, but the Sage support team has identified the bug. It's in Q&A right now, meaning they're doing their final testing, and it'll just be released out there, hopefully by the end of this week at the very latest. So then that feature will be working. And transactions to disassemble, that's a tricky word, disassemble kits can also be saved as draft. So love seeing that draft button become more and more available with the process of inventory. Couple other enhancements, and these are good ones for reporting because these are filters that you need to be able to do when you're running standard reports out of Intacct. So on the first bullet there, the filter by product line is now an available filter for all of those reports that are listed there. And then the bigger one that I think is really important is that the as of date is now included when you export reports. So I know we talk a lot about staying in Intacct and working in Intacct and doing what we need to do in there, right? But we sometimes have to export out it to other areas to show somebody something. And what happened is in the past, it always just gave you the run date of the report, what date you were running it on, which might not have been your as of date. So now it has the as of date of the report when you do those exports, as noted there on the screen. So definitely something that was needed there. All right, platform and web services. David.
Yep. All right, next slide, please. All right, great. So first, let's talk about some platform services enhancements. So first is quick filtering. So you're now going to have the ability to filter for specific objects and fields in platform services lists when enabled for the Action UI. Next enhancement here is the enhanced installation of platform applications with UDDs. So some of you might remember that in 2019, release 3, Intacct introduced this ability to include user-defined dimensions in your platform apps. And so in this release, there's some more functionality here that Intacct has now simplified the approval process by eliminating any manual steps you might have gone to authorize these installations. So I think we're going to see this with a lot of things going forward, more things building on top of each other as they get rolled out in releases. And then finally, in platform services, we have standard object support on platform pages. And so to enhance usability of platform services, many of the standard objects are now fully supported on the platform services page. So some cool enhancements here for platform services. Next slide, please. Great, and then let's talk about web services enhancements. So what's new here? You're now going to see the ability to use purchasing transaction allocations to automatically distribute amounts for non-inventory purchasing transaction lines. I'm going to touch on this a little bit later. You're also going to see the ability to create draft contracts, contract lines, and contract expenses, and then post them when ready. You're also going to see support for the inventory value only adjustments for specific source transaction lines. And then finally, in web services enhancements, we have a new query function that provides significant enhancements over the existing read by query function. So again, it's cool additions here in web services and platform services. Great, next let's jump into reporting and insights. So the first we have here is the aging report enhancement. So you're going to see that both the vendor and customer aging reports in both the AR and AP module have been upgraded. So until now, if you selected today as the report as of date, but you entered something completely different other than today's date in the selected date filter field, the selected date was going to be ignored in favor of today's date. In this release, that's now changed, and the entered date is going to be the one that is honored. So one thing to note here is that the report is going to default. The report defaults the run the report as of today's date, and it's going to populate the date to use section with today's date. However, if you change it to the select date using that radio button, the date to use is going to be blank and then allows you to enter in a new date. So a change here that might confuse some people at first, but you'll get to learn it as you go ahead and use the aging reports.
Yeah, for sure. And David, this is so cool. This is maybe one of my favorite features of this release because the other way around too. Now, if they type in the date to use, what happens? So if you type in date to use and you didn't click the select date, it auto fills in the
Defaults.
select date for
Yeah.
you. Yay! Yay, yay.
Yep.
Good,
Sorry, I
good
was on
one.
mute there.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I love it.
All right, great. And then continuing on with some aging report enhancements, kind of just touching on what we just talked about, but to make things more clear, labels in the time period section have been changed. So you'll see there that selected date is now going to be shown as select date. It's that radio button right there. And then what used to be select date is now date to use. And so that's the filter right there where you're going to add in the actual date that the report's going to run. And then finally, you might have noticed that the default exchange rate type has been removed. And this was removed because it sometimes caused aging and the GL to be out of balance. So this rate can still be selected if needed when running this report. You'll see the filter at the top if you are multi-currency, and you'll be able to select whatever the reporting currency is that you need here. Great, next slide. And then we're going to talk about some custom report writer enhancements. So in this release, you're going to see enhancements to having more objects and their descriptions being added for use with the custom report writer. You're going to see that when you add a report to a dashboard now, the report is going to respond to the selected as of date for the whole dashboard. Previously, it was kind of individual as what you set the as of date within individual reports on that dashboard. So that's now a change there. And then you'll be able to create a view for the report list that includes any runtime filters that you might add to your custom report writer reports. And so all the things that I just mentioned above, they have also been added to the interactive custom report writer if you're using that in your system. And one addition there to the interactive custom report writers that you're also now going to be able to add your company logo to the top of reports, and it's also going to show in dashboards. So some cool new functionality here for both the custom report writer and interactive custom report writer. And next slide. And now Irene's going to take it off to the Salesforce integration.
All right. Lots of users using Salesforce. Make sure that if you do have a Salesforce integration, this information is passed off to anyone in your organization that is working or is maintaining the integration so that they're aware of changes that are available to them with Salesforce integration changes on the releases. This time, just a couple small ones, an update to the bill in advance object. So enhanced support for the bill in advance fields. This is on your Salesforce contracts, and it gives you the ability for providing more flexibility for your start and end dates. So if you're using Salesforce contracts, you'll want to make sure that you've got this available now. Removed field requirements from billing start, end, and date fields and added an option to set a default preference. So in other words, in the past, they were required. Now you can go in and you can either make them required or not make them required. And then the other, looks like a facelift. The other update here, enhancement, was that all field mapping pop-ups were given a facelift and are now formatted for the Action UI. So that's nice. So that means if you're integrating between Salesforce and Intacct and you have a field mapping pop-up, it's going to have the Action UI look, the Intacct look, not the old UI that was in Intacct previously. So they're really trying to get rid of the old UI here and everywhere, even with integration pop-ups and that sort of information. So nothing major there, but a few nice little features to pass on to your team that does the integrations. Okay, workflow. Workflow is always a good one. David?
Yep, some really cool changes here. So let's go ahead and next slide, please. All right, great. So the first one we're going to talk about, which I kind of mentioned earlier, is that you're now going to be able to allocate shared costs in purchasing with just a few clicks. So transaction allocations are now going to be available in the purchasing module after you go ahead and you receive an invoice from a vendor. So this currently only applies to any purchasing transactions that are going to be posting to the AP subledger directly. But in the future and further releases, more posting types are going to be available. So be on the lookout for that. And something that's great about transaction allocations is they just really help to improve your reporting, and they're going to cut down on a lot of manual entry by users by already setting up your allocations, what should be going to certain locations, departments, project, customer, vendor, employee, class. There's a whole bunch of dimensions in there. So really cool functionality to use, or if you're interested, and look into. Next. Next is the new minimize inventory costs with buy to order. So this is a new workflow that is designed to order stock for customers only when a sales order is placed. And this is potentially going to save you inventory costs as well as reduce your dead stock and also improve your cash flow. So a cool new workflow to really help take advantage of those things. So the way it works is that when you create a sales transaction and you indicate buy to order for certain items, one or more purchase transactions are going to be automatically created for those applicable vendors and items, and then the transactions will then follow their respective workflows. So you're going to see right here in order entry, or any other module where you have any items, you can click here to go ahead and configure and enable buy to order. And then what you'll also have to do is any vendors it might be applicable to, as well as any items, you're also going to have to signify that buy to order is being used here. Just a few details on this workflow is that your company needs to be properly configured before you use this workflow. You're only going to be able to select this workflow for items that are inventory or non-inventory types. It may be extended to further in the future, but for right now, it's just those. And then finally, so after your purchasing transactions are generated, any associated lines you might have on your order entry transactions will not be able to be edited. So new lines can go ahead and be added, but the existing buy to order lines will not be able to be edited at all. So order entry transactions can only be deleted if the corresponding purchasing transactions that were generated first are also deleted first. So just something to note here if you are going to go ahead and use this workflow in the future. And then finally, next slide, please. Great, is the visibility of country names and transaction headers. And so we can see here, note this was from the community. I think a lot of people were asking for this, probably something that a lot of people are happy for. Nice little change that can make a big difference. So country name has now been exposed in various fields on the header for both any order entry or purchasing transactions. So before, you might know that you had to go into the actual contact record to see, but now eliminating that little bit of time to just see it at a quick glance, see what the country name is a really small change, but I think one that people will find really helpful in the future. So again, the power of the community, and really cool to see that it got added. And next is accounts receivable. So a few big things here in accounts receivable. First, you're going to notice is the automate application of inline credits. And so this is a new configuration option that's going to allow you to keep your aging reports accurate by reflecting the very true state of your transactions at the present time. And it's really going to help you eliminate any manual application of credits to help you save time and also to try to help you avoid error. So we are encouraging everyone to use this feature unless you're using the contracts module or you have any smart events or smart rules in the AR module currently. So how does this work? So sometimes you'll have an invoice that might contain both negative and positive line items. And so when you enable this configuration, any negative line item is going to automatically apply itself to positive line items in an invoice until that credit is completely consumed within that particular invoice. So any unused credits going forward will remain available for application on any future invoices for the same customer. So some things we want to note here, make sure you're aware of if you're going to go ahead and use this, is that first off, this was auto-checked in your configuration for this release. So you might be using it and you might not even be knowing it. So a good thing to go check in your AR configuration. Next is that the application of inline credits shows up in the system as a payment. The system shows that when a negative line item is applied to a positive line item, it shows as a payment on there. So you won't be able to delete any invoices because of this. You'll still be able to reverse them out, but the delete functionality is taken away because it shows that a payment has been applied. And then finally, if you're going ahead and you're using the receive a payment screen, it's going to show the invoice with credits applied if you have this configuration checked. So for example, kind of using the invoice below as an example, if you had this turned on and you went into the receive a payment screen, you would show that you have 380 to receive here as the total of 400 minus the 20 that was applied in line. So it'll only show 380. If you're not using this, the screen will show as it kind of normally was, might have been in the past. It'll show that you have $400 to receive, and then you would have to apply the $20 credit within that screen as well. So just a few things to keep note of here. And Irene, I don't know if you want to add anything else here.
Yeah, no, that was a great description, a good call out for those of you because it definitely is a change in how you might be using the system. So the biggest call out here is it is a good feature if in general, Intact is recommending it. It's helping eliminate that application and it's keeping things in balance better. But if you do have the ability to turn or to delete invoices, then and you do a lot of negative line items, just note that you're not going to be able to delete that invoice. And hopefully, I don't think that's a huge deal for most organizations because you don't delete invoices very often, right? Generally, you know what you're doing. You're doing your invoices over an order entry and on you go. But if you do ever need to delete one and you've got that check, you're not going to be able to do it. You just have to reverse it. So good feature, but just be aware of the full functionality. So
Hmm.
thanks, David.
Yeah,
Mhm.
definitely. All right, next slide, please. Next, we have introducing some changes to how payments and credits are applied. So how does this work? It's a new waterfall method that's going to automatically determine how both your partial and your full payments are going to be applied to invoices. So when like using this method, a payment or a credit is going to be applied to the first line of the invoice, and then it's going to move down and down and down and down until each line is fully consumed. So partial payments will be made in the same way, except that any additional payments continue at the next line that has a balance. So if you had a partial that only consumed $200 of a $400 line, that would remove the $200 there. And then when your next partial payment would be applied, it would go ahead and start from that line to consume the rest. And then you also have some credit application choices for multi-entity companies. So there's two things to note here. So first, for multi-entity companies, this new waterfall logic, you'll see that is really going to reduce any number of inter-entity transactions you might have by distributing payments and credits throughout the invoice in a particular order. You're going to wind up with fewer transactions because payments are going to be applied in line item order within the entity itself. Before any remainder is applied elsewhere. And then secondly is if your multi-entity company is set up to limit credits to that owning entity only, Intacct is going to automatically apply credits within the entity only, again, reducing your inter-entity transactions to theoretically zero. So if there's a credit amount remaining, that amount is going to be reserved for future use within that owning entity, again, to be applied to certain customers. So again, kind of building off what we just talked about in the last slide, but how this waterfall method is now working. Great, next slide. And then finally, in accounts receivable, we have that manual deposits now include positive line items only. So this is a new feature to help avoid possible issues with your reconciliations mainly. So manual deposits will now only include positive line items only, which means that you're no longer going to be able to make any negative manual deposits or add negative line items that you might have in the past to a manual deposit that you're creating. Again, the upside to this is really clean and clear reconciliations about what is going into it. So going forward, our best practice would be to say that you undo any incorrect manual deposits that might have been made in the past by going ahead and finding that manual deposit that you want to go ahead and correct in the receipts register and then just reverse it out and then recreate. So some new functionality here around manual deposits and might be different from what you used in the past. So good thing to take heed of.
Yeah, and I haven't seen this yet, but sometimes, guys, when we have a new feature like this enabled, and you try to go back in and edit an existing document that maybe allowed it at the time, it might not allow you to do that anymore. So just beware if you have been having negative line items and you try to go back to a previous transaction, it might be pretty well locked down now since they enabled this new feature.
Yeah,
Okay.
good call out.
All right,
Okay.
polling question number 4, last one of the webinar. Our company will benefit from the following features in this release. Sorry.
That should say following, shouldn't
It
it, guys?
shouldn't. Yeah, it jumped at me. Sorry about that. Following features in this release: new AR waterfall payment method, automatic application of inline credits, the MEA allocation detail reporting object, visibility of the country in order entry and purchase order, the as of date when generating allocations in Dynamics allocations. All right, so pick one of those. Remember CPE 75%. We will be sending out the recording, and our learning and development team will follow up with everyone that is getting CPE on this webinar. A few more seconds here.
Yeah, let's a couple of them here to read.
All right, let's go ahead and see the results.
Okay, so about 34% will use the new AR waterfall payment method. That's good to hear. I know it's been asked for a while now, so good to know. About 21% think you'll use the automatic application of inline credits. Excellent. Again, beware, it is turned on automatically for everybody. So if you don't want to use it, you want to make sure and go in and turn it off. And then anybody that's in your team also that might be doing things in AR, make sure they're familiar with that process and how it's going to change a little bit. A couple people maybe, the MEA allocation detail report, good. Glad that's going to be of use. 15% visibility of the country in order entry and purchasing. Tells me a lot of you are US and don't deal in other countries, which is fine. And then the as of date when generating allocations in dynamic allocations. So good to see that there's some features here that everybody's going to be able to use. That's good news. We did have one question come up on the manual deposit screen, not really a question, but more of a comment, and that is, when using the manual deposit screen, the only dimension that's available is department. I guess I didn't know that was the only dimension available, so I'm going to check into that. But again, the manual deposit isn't necessarily recommended to be used a lot, so I'd love to know more about why that's being used and how it's being used. There might be a better solution, but that is true with both the manual checks and the manual deposits. There are some limitations to those, a lot of things you can't do with those once you use those screens. So you want to make sure that there's a good use case for using those screens. So I'll take that offline and we can talk about that. Okay, across applications, a few things. Funny how we go from day to day, right? And we might not notice new things. Maybe you've noticed this, maybe you haven't, but they've added this shortcut, if you will, to list pages from a detail page. So it's this little blue icon, and if you hover over it in Intacct, it says Go to List. What this is intended to do is to quickly get you back to the list you started from. So maybe you're in purchasing and you drill down on a vendor invoice, you drill down further to the purchase order, you drill down further to the purchase requisition. Up in the top where you started will stay there with this little drill down, and you can click on it and go right back to the original list. So I've seen it useful in a few situations, but notice that now you guys will all notice that when you're in Intacct next time working, if you haven't noticed it already. But just the ability to quickly get back to where you started on list screens. Another enhancement is this one's all right. I know I said there's been a few favorites along the way, but everybody's going to chime in here and agree with me, nod your heads. This is a really good one too, and that is that the column headings on list views are sticky now. So if you didn't notice that, if you can see here, I've scrolled down on the bills list quite a ways. The green arrow shows where I've scrolled down, but my headers are staying at the top of my list. So I don't have to filter to get my headers to show. I can scroll down and still see my headers. Yay! I think this is a really good one. So nice to see that one here. One other call out, and I apologize if David, if you already mentioned this, but I just want to say it again. If you vote for an idea in the community, when that feature is released, you will get an email telling you that feature has been released. Intacct does release stuff at times other than the release webinar. when they do a new release. And so I actually got 2 emails about 3-4 weeks ago that Intacct had released 2 things that I had voted in on the community. So again, voting on those ideas, posting, adding ideas and voting on them is really beneficial. If it's something that you guys need in your company, you will get notified when you vote on that idea. So hopefully then the next step will be in reporting in other areas. They'll make these column headings sticky as well, but at least we've got them in our lists now, so that's exciting. And the last one, that was the last feature release that we had. So let's see if we have some more questions in the queue, Tracy. Let's see here. Manual deposits, we talked a little bit about that one. We've got one regarding cash receipt postings. You said that we can now go to the top level and post receipts for sub entities. Is that correct? Yes, that is correct from the bank feed. So that's related to bank feeds only, not cash receipts. So, and maybe that's what your question is alluding to. So we're talking about the feature that David spoke to with bank feed. And if you have cash receipts, those cash receipts are available under transactions in cash management, and you can then go apply those receipts to invoices in Intacct. All right, and so those are the receipts from the bank feed that even if you so they're at the top level because you're doing your bank rec at the top level. Those transactions are at the receipts coming in from the bank feed are sitting at the top level. And so yes, now if you click to apply it, you can apply it to an invoice at the top level or the entity level. So I hope that's what your question is. It is related to the bank feed. So yes, that's true if your question is related to the bank feeds.
Perfect.
But no, that's not true if you're just doing a standard cash receipt, of course, because we don't apply those to invoices. Okay, I think that's all the questions in the queue, and we're about out of time.
Yep, we are. Well, I have a little bit of an ending summary. So thank you, Irene and David, for the amazing content, and for you, the audience, for your questions and being live with us here. If you guys have any more specific questions, feel free to shoot Irene or David an email directly or through our website. We're happy to help. Remember to look out for the slides and the recording. We'll be sending that within 48 hours. And also, again, for the CPE, take the quick survey at the end, and our L&D team will check those and get your certificates out for everyone who's eligible today. And with that, I'd like to thank you guys again for joining us on our first Sage Intacct webinar. We look forward to seeing you back up here on Release 2. So have a great week.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, everybody.